Hi there guys, and welcome to another video. Well, today I'm actually giving you the second episode in a series called SpaceInvader Strikes Back. You never heard of it? Well, I'm not really surprised. The first episode was actually probably 4 or 5 years ago, and I never decided to actually continue with the series. But I've had a rethink, and I think I really want to actually interact with the community a lot more. So once a month or once every 5 or 6 weeks, I'm going to make a video like this where I speak to you guys, the SpaceInvader and Unraid community, where I want to get your feedback from various things. I want to let you know things that are coming up and basically just chat about pretty much random things. So the type of things you can expect in these videos is I'm going to be telling you about upcoming videos I'm planning, any new kind of hardware or gadgets I've got, various things I'm just doing randomly in my home lab, and also going through questions I've received on various videos I've released in the past, answering them in person here. So I do actually read all of the comments, or most of them for sure, in all of the videos. So please put comments there, anything you want me to actually answer, especially if you post them in a SpaceInvader Strikes Back video, you'll probably get a reply in the next episode. So anyway, moving on, what videos have I got planned coming out soon? Well, I've got some things that I think are pretty cool. There's a video coming out soon. I'm not sure if I'm going to release it this week or next week, depending on which way round I complete the editing. But if you remember, I did a video a while ago about sleep settings on Unraid servers, and I mentioned in that video about having a custom tab on the top of the Unraid GUI with different names of different servers. You could click onto that and it would actually send a wake on LAN packet to another server and wake it up. Well, I'm going to be doing that video with what I call turbocharged custom tabs. You need to have Andrew, or Squid as he's known in the Unraid community, his excellent custom tabs plugin installed. And what this does is when you click on one of the custom tabs, it opens up another web page. So what I figured is we could actually run a web page on our Unraid server, which will call a little piece of PHP, and then that can run a script. So what you can do now with the custom tabs is actually click onto a tab. You can have it so it even starts up your Windows gaming VM, but at the same time, not only starting the VM, it could also set the CPU governor to be into performance mode. So basically making sure the gaming VM is running in its best performance that it can. So I'm sure you guys can think of a whole load of things that you might want to be able to trigger from clicking a button at the top. You can have it run a backup script, that kind of thing. Obviously, there's going to be things that you might not want to run straight away, just in case you accidentally click on a button. But what I've done is I've designed it so for certain buttons, it will actually do a countdown where you can actually click a cancel button, and if you don't, you can click continue, or it will just count down from 5. So I think that's going to be quite a fun video. I find it really useful myself, and hopefully you guys will too. So what else? Well, I've been messing around a lot with Tailscale. When I went to Germany and met the Nextcloud guys, I was speaking to Brent over there from Jupiter Broadcasting, and those guys, they love Tailscale and really got me into wanting to try it out, and I've been using it, and in my opinion, well, it's really awesome. But there's some really interesting things that you can actually do with it. So most of us, you know, we want to access various services that we've got running on our server. You know, you've got a reverse proxy, you might want to access Nextcloud, Jellyfin, Plex, Sonar, Radar, anything, all kinds of containers you might want to access. And so you've set up a reverse proxy. Now, reverse proxies are great, but what happens if you want to actually access something when you're away from home, but you don't really want anyone else to be able to access it by going to the URL? Why would you want to do that? Well, think about Bitwarden. You need to have Bitwarden accessible online for you, but you don't need it accessible for anyone else. Now, Bitwarden obviously has a web GUI, and you can actually log in there. And also the app on your phone, on your computer, the plugins in the browser, well, they also need to be able to access that URL. When you add a new password, it's got to save it to the database. So your Bitwarden has to be connected by a domain. But what we can actually do with Tailscale, because the Linux server.io containers, and they make a reverse proxy called Swag, My favourite reverse proxy for many reasons, to be honest. But what you can do with Swag or any Linux.io container is you can actually, using something called Docker mods, integrate Tailscale directly into that container. So what this means is we can set up a DNS record for Bitwarden, so pass.yourdomain.com. But what you do, instead of it pointing to your WAN IP, your WAN being the ISP IP that your internet service provider gives you at home, well, you can actually use the IP address that Tailscale has given Swag. So what that means is one subdomain, it resolves to Swag's Tailscale IP. Now that's really cool, because what it means is you actually have to be connected to the Tailscale network, or what's called the Tailnet, in order to be able to actually connect to your Bitwarden. So all you do is you put Tailscale on all of your devices, your phone, your laptop, whatever. And also what you can do if you've got family members is you can actually send them an invite to just the Swag, and they actually need to be signed up to Tailscale themselves. And what it'll do is it'll add that into their Tailscale, and so then they'll be able to access the server as well. So it's really nice because it keeps it totally private, but it's still fully functioning. Now obviously you could set up something similar for connecting with just a normal VPN, where you could just set a rule for that subdomain in Swag itself, or if you're using a different reverse proxy in that just restricts that particular domain to only allow various subnets, and subnet being basically just a range of IPs. So anything that isn't actually on your local network, it would say, hey, no, you can't connect. So basically it would work fine if you're at home, or if you're connected back home through a VPN when you're outside. But I think the Tailscale method is really good. Now I know some of you guys, you might say, yeah, I don't want to use Tailscale because it's kind of using a third party, but Tailscale, it uses WireGuard on the back end. But what Tailscale will actually do is it does allow you to make a direct connection from one machine to another, and the Tailscale infrastructure basically just points these two together so they can make a direct connection. Of course, everything's encrypted, all the data between them is encrypted because it's using an open source WireGuard tunnel. So the VPN, it's not proprietary, it uses WireGuard on the back end. All Tailscale does really is pretty much just point the devices to each other to make those individual connections when needed. And if for some reason you've got some really weird firewall settings that prevents it being able to make a direct connection between the two, it can actually use a relay service and make a connection through the relay. But most of the time it will always be a direct connection. So super fast, super private, and in my opinion, really cool. Now a while ago I made a video about setting up a Cloudflare tunnel. I really love Cloudflare tunnels, they're just really easy to set up. You don't need to open up any ports on your firewall for traffic to come in, but it can be a little bit of an issue if you're trying to stream a lot of data through. Now, I did read that their terms of conditions are kind of changed and you can do that, but some people say you can, some people say you can't, so probably the safest thing to do is don't go streaming like Jellyfinplex MB through a Cloudflare tunnel. But what happens if you've got internet like Starlink, anything behind carrier grade NAT where you can't port forward, well, you've got a bit of a problem. But again, with Tailscale, you can actually get around this. Yeah, it's going to cost a little bit of money, but what you can do is get a really cheap VPS. It's going to cost you probably, $4 a month or something. A little bit of cost involved, but if you've got carrier grade NAT, it can allow you to have a proper reverse proxy. So what you do is you just run something like Ubuntu server on there, install Docker, install Portainer so you can easily manage the containers, and install Swag. So then you run Swag on the actual VPS, but what you do as well, you see, is you connect the VPS using Tailscale back to your Unraid server. So basically all that happens really is the reverse proxy is running on a VPS and tunneling all the traffic through a WireGuard tunnel straight back to your server. So there's a series of tutorials coming about that, setting up Swag from start to finish. Now another really cool thing about Swag as well, which we'll be looking at in the video series, is you can actually set up Swag to say have like mb.yourserver.com and have it pointing to actually two different servers. Now I've got multiple servers that run in my home lab. I've got my main server that's on most of the time during the day. That uses around 100 watts. And if you saw my last video when I made my backup server, that has a duplicate of all my data on the main server, but it idles at 26 watts. I've got this little one up here, I'm not sure if you can see it, that Atari 800XL in the corner. That's a mini Unraid server. That's on all the time, using about 12 watts. Now I've mentioned it many times before, it runs Home Assistant, pfSense, but also it runs a swag container. So what that does is, for Jellyfin for instance, if I go to jellyfin.mydomain.com, if my main server's on, swag will send the traffic to there. But if that's actually down, it will then actually send the traffic to my backup server. If that one's down, it will then send the traffic to the container on the mini server that's got the least amount of films and TV shows on. But it's really nice that swag can do that, so you can have failover. If one thing's not up, it will go to the other. And also something that's pretty cool, guys, I'm not sure if you've ever seen it, there's a container called Watch State that actually allows you to synchronize watch states between various different media servers. So pretty useful if you want to sync up watch history and that kind of thing. Now I just want to mention the Uncast show. For you guys who may not have heard of it, the Uncast show is Lime Technology's official podcast channel, and yours truly is the host over there. And I get to interview some really interesting people. Recently, I've interviewed Tom Mortensen, who's obviously the creator and CEO of the awesome Unraid. I've interviewed Yosh, who is the co-founder of Nextcloud. And my most recent interview was Tom Lawrence from Lawrence Systems. And I talked to him all about pfSense, open source, and one of my favorite subjects, ZFS. So if you haven't checked out that channel, please see the link in the description. Go across to the Uncast show and subscribe to that channel. At the moment, we've got under 2,000 subscribers, so hopefully guys, if you're watching this, just pop across there, hit the subscribe button, then you'll be notified when new interviews come out on the channel. But also, it's not only interviews there, Stefano Petida from SPX Labs, he does a spot there, where he has something called the Monthly Digest, which basically says everything that's happened in the Unraid world during that month. So a really interesting little roundup of things that have happened. I suggest you go and check it out. But anyway, yeah, the Uncast show, well worth watching, in my opinion. Well, I'm bound to say that, yeah, but it is, honestly. So, other things, what have I been running in my lab recently? I recently set up Jellyseer because I use Jellyfin and MB. I'm not a Plex user, so obviously Overseer doesn't work for me. So Jellyseer is basically the Jellyfin and MB version of Overseer. It's basically just a fork of Overseer, and it's really, really awesome. Install it, guys, check it out. It's really simple. If you want a tutorial, put it in the comments below. As well, if you want any tutorials, just let me know, guys. You know, do you want more things about VMs? Do you want more things about Docker containers? You know, do you want, VMs and to do with Windows gaming, Linux gaming? I don't know, Mac OS, just tell me, what you want. Now, talking of Mac OS, I know a lot of you guys for quite a while now have been saying, when am I going to update Mac in a Box? Well, I actually have updated it, but I haven't released it yet. And you might wonder, why am I not releasing it? Well, I'm going to release it when the new version of Unraid comes out. There's a whole bunch of things in there that are really cool, and it makes running a Mac VM, to be honest, a whole lot easier. Now, if you want to see a sneak preview of Unraid 7, well, probably either this week or next week, I will be releasing a video across on the Uncast channel where I'll be showing you guys a whole bunch of the new features that are in the new OS. And really, it's pretty exciting. If you like VMs, guys, wow, the VM manager is just something else now. That's all I can say. So keep checking the Uncast channel if you want to see a sneak preview of Unraid 7. Keep checking back to there. Now, talking about Mac in a Box, obviously that's going to be updated when that comes out. I've got some other containers that I call in a box. There's one that I've had out for a while called Win98 in a Box, which basically installs a Windows 98 VM. You basically just install a container, it runs, and it installs a fully working Windows 98 VM straight onto your Unraid server. Now, you may have seen my RetroNAS in a Box, which installs a working RetroNAS VM. If you're not sure what RetroNaz is, well, if you check out RetroRGB, check out his YouTube channel. Obviously, it's into do with retro gaming. Check out his channel and you'll better find out about RetroNaz over there. But I will be making a video about how to actually set up and use RetroNaz. I don't think I've done that as yet, even though I've released the container. Now, there's some other inner box containers I've been working on. I've got Recalbox in a box, which basically installs a Linux distro called Recalbox, which is basically an emulation distro allowing you to play all of your old retro gaming things, such as Super Nintendo, Nintendo 64, PlayStation 1, 2, PlayStation 3, all that kind of thing. And I've made that so you can just literally install a container and it will install a VM straight onto your Unraid server. Now, I haven't released that yet. I'm still messing around doing the final touches on that. But also, I want to make another container called Batoseria in a box, which Batoseria is probably my favorite retro gaming distro. It's really, really awesome. I'll be making a video on that soon because I've just finished making my server cabinet, which is actually an old arcade cabinet. I stripped out the insides and kind of made a rack in there. I've got 3 servers, 3 4U rack mounted servers and a 2U UPS. And they're all running on Unraid, of course, and one of those servers is running a VM which runs Batoseria. So the arcade cabinet is fully functioning. I can play all of my old arcade games on there. All of my old retro gaming I can play on that. And I really like it because it houses the Unraid servers. And I don't need any other hardware to actually run the arcade cabinet because it's all running off a VM. And that VM is Batoseria. Again, there's going to be a video on the build of the arcade cabinet server rack, so keep an eye out for that. Now, talking about gaming and Linux, my friend Adam actually told me about a really awesome Linux distro, which is called Bazite. Now, it's based off Fedora, and basically, I think it's the best Linux gaming distro that I've really ever seen. Everything's set up straight out the box. You don't need to tweak anything. You can just install the distro and gaming just works really well. Now, if you've got a decent GPU in your Unraid server, well, just chuck it on as a VM and try it out. It's really, really good. I've been using it for about a week now and I think it's pretty awesome. Okay, so I think it's time now, guys, that we have a look at some of the comments in previous videos. So I'm going to go across to my desk now and we'll answer some questions. Okay, so let's move on to the first question. Now, I'm going to try not to butcher people's names while I'm trying to pronounce them. I'll try and make a better job than I did a moment ago when I mispronounced the distro Batoseria. I called it Batoseria, but hey, it was pretty close. Anyway, the first question is from Dr. Metroid on the video Wake Up Your Unraid, a complete sleep-wake guide. So the question is, RTC wake script require the server to be active, not asleep. So if S3 sleep plugin puts the server to sleep, will RTC wake script, if scheduled, will it be able to wake the asleep server, which is put to sleep by the S3 plugin? So basically what you're asking is, if the server's already asleep, can RTC wake actually wake it up? Well, unfortunately it can't, because RTC wake has to be the thing to make the server sleep, because it tells the server to sleep for say X amount of minutes. To use RTC wake, we normally trigger it with a script to run at a certain time. So obviously if the Unraid server's already asleep, it can't run any scripts. Now the S3 sleep plugin, it does have a feature which allows you to run a script before the server actually goes to sleep. So you could trigger RTC wake from there, but I don't really think it's going to do much good, because then when the server wakes back up, I think the S3 sleep plugin will probably continue and put the server back to sleep a second time. But I think it would be a pretty cool thing if the author integrated RTC wake into the actual sleep plugin so we could have the server wake up at a certain time. So guys, if you think that will be a cool feature, then if enough of you reach out to the author, maybe he'll think it's worthwhile putting in. So the next question from 01 Bernie on the backup server build video. Why is OneDrive ButterFS, 1ZFS and 2XFS? Is there a reason? Is it better to have a cache as ZFS rather than ButterFS? Well, in that video, There was mixed format drives basically because I'd just been messing around and experimenting with different file systems. But normally in the array I like to have all of my drives as XFS except for one which I put as ZFS. The reason being is I like to have my cache drives as ZFS, so yes, I prefer to have ZFS than Btrfs for cache drives, 100% definite for me. And so that brings me back to why I have one ZFS drive in the array, is because I like to use ZFS replication, because I have some pools in my server that are not mirrored, they're just single ZFS drives. So if I have another ZFS drive in the array, I can actually replicate and back up the data sets that are on the actual cache into the main array. So that's how I like to do it. So the next question is from Zighom. Again, it's on the backup server build video. And the question is, why spend money on a cache drive if the LAN is 1 gigabit? Well, basically because the drive isn't only used when you're accessing a share. There's only a certain amount of I/O that a drive can do, and if you've got a mechanical hard drive, well, that's limited to a much slower speed than an NVMe or an SSD. You may have multiple containers that are accessing things on your cache pool constantly, reading and writing data, so the faster the drive the better. The drives in the Unraid server aren't just for sending data across the network, it's for other duties as well. Now the next question is on a video I did about converting an array disk from one file system to another, and namely in that video it was ZFS. And Cousin2000 asks, once you've reformatted the disk to ZFS, I'm assuming you use unbalance to bring all of the data back to the original newly formatted disk. Instead, can you remove one array disk, reformat that drive, and then have it replaced by parity? Well, unfortunately, parity can't actually replace the data onto a different file system. How parity works is it basically just replaces the ones and zeros on that disk that make up the whole of the disk, including its file system. So if you were to do that, it would put the data back to what the original file system was, basically. So yes, using unbalance to bring the data back would be absolutely fine and is probably the easiest way, especially if you want to use a GUI, or you could just make a little rsync script and copy everything back using rsync. Whatever's easier, really. The next question is from Bold Sea Lion. Well, not really a question, I guess. It was on one of my Nextcloud videos, and he says, Firefly fan, yes! Haha, all of my computers are named after Firefly characters and places. Just finished the series again with our kid. He loved it. Well, I love Firefly as well, man. Now, Firefly was released in 2003, I think, and I probably didn't actually watch the series till 2010, maybe even 2012. So it'd been out probably 10 years before I'd ever seen it. So I'd read about how good it was meant to be, and I knew there was only actually one season. So going into watching it, I was a bit sad really, kind of knowing how great the series is meant to be, but there was only ever one season made. But absolutely awesome series. If anyone out there hasn't watched it, I'd really recommend watching that. And Bold Sea Lion, what are your servers and computers called? I'd love to know. Put it in the comments, let me know what your computers are called. One of my servers at the moment is called Serenity. That's one of my VM servers. And you can see there, that's the background I made for the kind of Unraid banner. Next, from Stay Up the Tree, on the 2-minute tips video, easily exchange SSH keys in 30 seconds or less, says that the only problem with this and the Sanoid Syncoid rsync script is the port 22 assumption. Now this is an excellent point. Totally slipped my mind really when making those scripts is everyone doesn't use SSH on the standard port 22. Some people out there may have changed the port to something else. So yeah, that's something I need to address and implement something into those scripts so the user can choose a non-standard SSH port if they've set that. So thanks Stay Up the Tree for pointing that out. Good call there. Next, from Shaphusted2714, again on the backup server build video, people would probably be better off waiting for Zen 5 or doing Zen 5 mobile. Honestly, even more efficient. Yeah, we're probably going to get Zen 5, I think in the second half of this year, but you can always wait for something that's in the future and end up never upgrading and buying anything. And also, I like the Intel CPU basically because of the iGPU. I think Intel have got that in the bag for efficient transcoding with the iGPU, something I don't think AMD can really compete with their iGPU offering. But yeah, Zen 5, something I will be looking forward to and definitely be testing out when it arrives. Okay, we've got time for one more. This is from Tango Echo Alpha UK, again on the backup server build video. Hey SpaceInvader 1, do you have a husky yourself? Any chance of seeing it in a video? I love huskies. Well, I love huskies as well. So, Shadow, come and make a guest appearance, girlie. Come on. Come here, Shadow. Come. Come here, Shadow. Sit. Shadow, sit. Sit. Paw. Other paw. Sit. Gently. Good girl. Okay guys, so I hope you enjoyed this video. Now, if you like this kind of content, please let me know. I'm going to be trying to make one of these every 4 or 5 weeks. So any ideas you have for videos, guys, put it in the comments below. I make these videos for you guys, so tell me what you want. VMs, containers, builds, just let me know. Will I always listen? Maybe I won't always listen, but I'll always hear what you say and I'll take it on board. Anyway guys, that brings us to the end of this video. Now, as always, I want to give a really big thank you. Thank you to all of you guys who support this channel. Thanks to all my patrons out there. Thanks to everyone who subscribes to the channel. It really, really does mean the world to me that you guys support me. Anyway guys, it's time for me to go now, but whatever you're up to for the rest of the day, I hope it's good, and I'll catch you in the next video.